dear candidate Mrs. Gitta van den Ende, dear friends and members of Gitta's family, dear colleagues, very warm welcome at this defense, this ceremonial session, during which Gitta van den Ende will defend her academic thesis, Shaping Choices, Shaping Minds, How Choice Architecture, Societal Support and Competitiveness Influence Decision-Making and Perceptions. May I invite you, Gitta, to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear committee members, dear supervisors, dear friends, families, colleagues, both here and online, it's my great pleasure to take you through my dissertation called Shaping Choices, Shaping Minds. Because both these choices and these minds play a central role in how we feel, in our well-being. Making choices that fit your goals and holding a positive view about yourself create a greater sense of happiness and life satisfaction. And this well-being not only matters for your own mental and physical health, but also matters for society as a whole. It's connected to greater productivity, stronger social bonds, and more social engagement. This dissertation focuses on the processes that underlie well-being, so we investigate contextual and psychological processes that shape the choices and the minds. And to illustrate this research, I'd like to use the image on the cover of my dissertation. Finding happiness in life is like finding our way through a maze. Every turn involves a choice. Do you go left or do you go right? And every step depends on how you feel walking through it. Like in life, the decisions we make and the way we see ourselves matter for reaching a sense of well-being. And in this maze, our path is shaped by two forces, what lies around us and what happens within us. The walls represent the situations and the environments that can either guide or limit our choices, but this maze also exists in your minds. It influences how you see these surroundings and how you see yourself as you move through it. And this dissertation studies these processes in 3 projects, each focusing on a different aspect of this maze. First, we look at the layout of the maze, and we investigate how the presentations of the options guide the choices that you make. Second, we focus on the looks of the signs of support along the way, and we investigate how your perception of this support investigate the choices that you make. And finally, this maze is not only about the perception of the environment and about your choices that you make, but it's also about how you see yourself while moving through it. And in this 3rd project, we focus on the role of competitiveness and shaping such perceptions of the self. And if we now zoom in on the first part of this maze, we see the choices that people face every day. And that is the choice of what to eat. Do you go for that apple or do you go for the chocolate? And even though we oftentimes want to eat healthy, we often end up choosing the less healthy option. And not necessarily because we lack motivation, because these choices are made quickly, almost automatically. While making these kind of choices, we make use of mental shortcuts, something psychologists call heuristics, that can sometimes lead us in the wrong direction. In the first research project, called Attract the Best, we investigate whether we can use these heuristics to help people to actually make better choices. And a good example of how you can influence choices with heuristics is the attraction effect. And let me first explain this effect to you. Imagine you walk into your favorite coffee place and you see these 2 options. So a smaller coffee for $2.50 and a bigger one for $4.50. The attraction effect means that if you add a less appealing option, the decoy, you can influence what people would buy. In this case, adding the middle option of $4.25 will make people more likely to choose the bigger option, because that suddenly seems like a great deal. And marketeers often use this idea to guide you towards the products that they want to sell. However, in this project, we investigate whether we can use this principle to guide people towards the more healthier choices. And in the experimental study of this paper, we let participants indeed choose between healthy and unhealthy products, such as between the grapes and the cookies. And we described those products on certain dimensions, such as taste rating and quality of ingredients. Half of the participants chose between these two products, and there we found that the choice share was relatively 50-50. So a bit more than half chose the grapes and the other one chose the cookies. The other half of the participants also saw the third option. There we added the decoy to the choice set, and we constructed the dimensions in such a way that the grapes clearly dominated the carrots. In this group, where participants also saw the decoy, we saw that much more participants chose the healthy grapes. More than 70% chose the grapes in this group. So by simply just adding a decoy to the choice set, we made the healthy choice option clearly stand out. And now we also want to test whether this effect would also hold in other contexts. So we let participants make some other choices. And one of the choices they made is between only unhealthy products or between several healthy products. Also here, half of the participants only saw these two options. And also here, the choice share was relatively 50-50. And the other half of the participants also saw the decoy. So they made the choice between the three products. And we found here that we found an attraction effect only when participants chose between the only unhealthy products. So in this choice set, the decoy made our target, in this case the M&Ms, more likely to be chosen. But we did not find an effect when all the products were healthy. So together in this project, we found that we can use the attraction effect when people are choosing between only unhealthy products, or when we can help them to choose a healthy product when they're debating between a healthy and an unhealthy product. And the results show that changes in how you present your options, we can steer behavior. So by understanding how people make decisions, you can design environments to make the healthier choice also the easier choice. And while this first project focused on the design of the choice, so the arranging of the walls in the maze, the next one looks at the environment from a different angle. Not by changing the environment, but by changing how people perceive it. In the second research project, Feeling Well Surrounded, we investigate how those perceptions of the environment influence the choices that you make. Because in this maze, there are usually signs and support around us that can help us to move in the right direction. And in real life, you might think of sport facilities in your neighborhood, a supportive work environment, or friends and families who encourage us. And indeed, research has shown that the availability of this support matters. It has a positive effect on your physical activity, on your job satisfaction, and on happiness in general. However, in this project, we show that's not just the availability of the support matters, but also how you perceive it. So whether you perceive this support to be helpful or not can influence the choices that you make. And we test this prediction in 2 studies. And in the first study, participants read an article about the available support in the society. So they read an article about healthy food options in the supermarket and on healthy information on the internet. Half of the participants read in the article that all that available support is very helpful in reaching their goals. The other one read that it is not so helpful in reaching their goals. After reading this article, everyone made a choice between healthy and unhealthy products. And we found that the participants who read the article that available support is helpful were more likely to make healthier food choices compared to the other group. In the second study, we again let participants read one of the 2 articles, but instead of this hypothetical choice task, we observed actual eating behavior. So we observed how much of an unhealthy food item, in this case the cookies, participants would eat after reading the article. And we found that the participants who read that the available support was helpful ate less cookies than the participants in the other group. So together in these studies, we show that's not just the availability of the support that matters, but also how you perceive it. So when people feel that the support is helpful for reaching their goals, they also make healthier food choices. And so far, in the first two projects, I've shown you how the world around us, so the layout of the choices and the support we receive, can influence the choices that we make. But this maze is not only about the environment and about the choices, it's also about the person walking through it. And that's the focus of the third project. We zoom in on this person, not on the options around them, but how they see themselves, so how capable they feel, or how smart, or how fit. And these self-views, they matter. They shape how you deal with challenges, how confident you feel, and how satisfied you feel with your life. In this third project, I want, therefore I am, we investigate how competitiveness can influence such perceptions of the self. Because nowadays competition is everywhere, and not just in sports and games, but also in schools, in the workplace, or on social media. And it's not always about winning prizes or finishing first. Sometimes it's simply about wanting to be better than others. And so far, much research has focused whether competitiveness affects performance. So whether you solve problems more quickly or whether you run faster. But these effects turn out to be small or even non-existent. Our project takes a different angle, and we investigate how competitiveness changes the way you perceive yourself. So your perceived intelligence and your perceived fitness rather than how you truly perform. And we investigate this relationship between competitiveness and the self-evaluations in 5 studies, of which I present to you the most important findings of 2 studies. In one study, we conducted a field study among university students. So we followed those students throughout 8 weeks, and we measured their trait competitiveness, so in general, how competitive they are. And at several points of time, we asked them to rate them how intelligent they perceive themselves. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how intelligent will you see yourself? In the study, we find that across all measurements in the study, the more competitive the students were, the more intelligence they rated themselves. So in this first study, we showed that the relationship between competitiveness and self-evaluations persists over time in a natural context. In the next study, we tested where the effect would also hold in another domain, and we investigated its behavioral consequences. In this study, we examined people's perception of their own fitness level. So we relate that to any type of movement or exercise activity. And instead of measuring competitiveness, we manipulated it. And we used an advertisement for a social fitness app for it. Half of the participants saw an advertisement in where we primed a competitive mindset to the participants. The other half of the participants saw a more neutral advertisement. After seeing this advertisement, participants rated their general fitness level. And to test its behavioral consequences, we also asked how likely they are to share any fitness-related activities on the social fitness app. And in the results, we find that the students in the competitive manipulation, so who saw the competitive advertisement, rated themselves constantly a higher fitness level than the other participants, and were also more likely to share any activities with others on such a social fitness app. So, across all the studies in this paper, the pattern is clear. Competitiveness, whether measured or whether manipulated in different contexts, increases self-evaluations and increases your likeliness to share your activities with others. And now that we've explored all parts of this maze, it's time to take a step back and look at the full picture in the conclusion. In this dissertation, we examined 2 key processes in shaping well-being, the choices and the minds, and we investigated how both can be influenced. Across the 3 projects, we found that the ability to make choices that fit your goals or to maintain a positive self-view is not simply a matter of willpower. Instead, it's influenced by the environment, how you perceive those environments, and by the social dynamics that shape how people perceive themselves. First, we showed that small, thoughtful changes in how options are presented can help you to make healthier choices. Second, we demonstrated that people are more likely to make healthier choices when they perceive existing support to be helpful. And third, we found that competitiveness positively affects how people evaluate themselves and how they express their own abilities. Together, these findings show that small psychological and contextual adjustments can make meaningful differences, offering simple, scalable ways to support better choices and more positive minds. And we can't claim that the attraction effect and perceived societal support and competitiveness solve all the challenges of well-being. But they do represent a small, meaningful piece, a brick in the wall of life's maze. By adjusting these bricks, we can make the path through the maze a little easier to walk on, a little easier to find your way to well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And as you are well aware, a clear presentation and an interesting PhD dissertation is an open invitation for an opposition, which we've organized for you today. And we'll open the opposition traditionally by giving the floor to the chair of the assessment committee, Professor Dr. Lisa Brugge, who holds the chair of financial well-being at Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, dear Gitta, let me start by congratulating you as well as both your supervisors to a dissertation that addresses an important and societally also very relevant topic, namely how internal and external factors shape subjective well-being and decision-making. So I read it also with great interest, but obviously that also leads to a number of questions that I would like to discuss with you today. My first question relates to chapter 4. I want, therefore I am. And you report in the chapter, or you introduce this competitive component in this chapter, for example, in university courses, and you find that it affects self-appraisal and promotes constructive thoughts about one's capabilities. Now, this is an interesting conclusion, but it also brings to mind what it's sometimes called the lamppost problem or drunkard's search. So basically a drunk who loses his keys on a dark street and only looks for them under the lamppost, because that's where the light is. He may find them or may not find them if they're outside the light. And in research, this analogy captures basically the tendency to really focus, often with our dependent variables, on outcomes that are easy to measure or expected to improve. But in this way, you actually may ignore broader effects, so potentially even unattended side effects or spillover consequences. And I would like to challenge you a little bit on this, because you focus on self-evaluations, but in your conclusion, you also briefly talk about the fact that competitiveness could also increase anxiety or reduce intrinsic motivation or impair cooperation or more negative social comparisons. But we don't know, because that was not under your lamppost. So I would like to hear actually your reflection on why you chose what you did to do and what you think the effect could have been on these other factors that you did not study.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation and for your question. So indeed, we focused on the light of the self-evaluation, and we showed in multiple studies that it showed your evaluation about yourself. We also showed, especially in study 2A, that it did not affect any grades you received. So that would correlate with the fact that it might impact how you see yourself, but not necessarily your performance, which is also in line with previous research. So I think what is with every research, you try to focus on one aspect of what you're investigating. And I think especially with these kind of psychological concepts such as competitiveness, can have a lot of different effects there, and one, it can increase your self-perception, but I think, in this study we didn't really had to deal with extreme cases of competitiveness, so also in the manipulations they were rather subtle. They didn't really manipulate it like extreme competitiveness, making them really likely to make sure that the others around them performed less good. But also it didn't really inflate the evaluations in the terms that it was super unrealistic. I'll come back later to that, because I think it has this better than average effect, that you think you are better than you probably actually are. But this could also result in some overconfidence. That you think that, okay, I am very intelligent, so I don't need to study for this paper anymore, which reduces your motivation to actually study for your paper. So that could be some negative side effects for that. And that we also kind of found in the second study, whereas we see that throughout the time, especially coming closer to when you receive your grade, this effect came a bit less strong. But I think there it could be for a negative effect for yourself. And I think competitiveness could also have very negative effects in interpersonal relationships. So,
and maybe following up on this, so if you were to continue this line of research, how would you design possibly the next study to account for such effects?
Yeah. I think what would be interesting if we could have some kind of measurement that would investigate the actual ability of someone as opposed to their intent, their evaluation of their ability. I mean, with the concepts we focused on, they were a bit abstract. So it's intelligence. You could think of an IQ test, but there you can really see whether there's actually an effect, and maybe investigate whether it has some downstream consequence, for example, on motivation to work for the exam in such a paper. So that's more what I would do for your personal, but maybe also have some measurements on how it affects the perception of your students of yourself. So whether it affects the relationship with others.
But you don't bring in back the intersocial aspect here, because that could also be interesting to study the effect in the interaction with others. Huh?
Yeah, so that's indeed what I would use with what I tried to say with the last part, is that you could also investigate how others would see you.
Oh, yeah.
So whether it would change your relationship in a personal way, in a social way, but maybe also how others perceive your abilities there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We continue the opposition by giving the floor to Professor Dr. Maggie Geuns, marketing professor at Ghent University, Belgium. Maggie.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, as the chair already mentioned, by investigating how internal and external factors influence subjective well-being, you address a very societal issue. You pose 3 original and academically relevant research questions that you investigate by 9 empirical studies. Moreover, you succeeded in describing each of your chapters and studies in a very fluent and at the same time professional way. Hence, reading your thesis was a true joy. So congratulations on that. But of course, I also have a question. Yeah? And my question is somewhat related to 2 of your propositions. Therefore, I would like to ask the Paranymph to read proposition 1 and proposition 9, please.
Proposition 1. Even small, subtle interventions can help people make choices that align better with their long-term goals. Proposition 9. Bad outcomes often reflect failing systems more than failing individuals. Environments must be designed to shape better choices.
Okay. So, dear candidate, as you may know, there is an ongoing debate over whether researchers and policymakers should focus on the I frame or the S frame to tackle the obesity crisis. Or in other words, whether we should try to change individuals' behavior or instead change our current food system. Yeah. So people in favor of the I frame, they consider obesity the result of individuals' lack of self-control and a tendency for present bias. Whereas people in favor of the S frame claim that, well, consumers' present bias has not changed over time, but our obesity has. So, and since food system has also changed, it's probably due to the food system and not to the individuals. They support their view by noting that systematic changes also tend to engender larger effect sizes than individual changes. Yeah? Now, if you look at the core arguments in your dissertation, and that is that environmental contexts shape consumer behavior, often steering individuals toward choices that can either support or actually hinder their long-term goals and therefore their well-being. At the same time, you also want to preserve consumers' freedom of choice. You mentioned that a couple of times in your general discussion. Now, given that you're interested in consumers' well-being, what is your take on the discussion that is going on? given everything that you have read during the past years and given the results and effect sizes of all the studies that you have conducted, what is the progressive insight then that you have arrived at? Is our well-being best served by continuing to focus on individual responsibility and actually take our food system as a given? Or should the food system be changed, be it by taxation, bans, legislation, so that the present bias becomes less of a problem? Which alternative do you think would result in higher well-being? So I'm looking forward to your ideas on this.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation and for your question. So indeed, there's a large debate on where you should put the responsibility on, right? So whether it should be the individual freedom of choice, should make the rational, the good decisions, or whether we as a society should make sure that they can make perform the right behavior. And I think the research in my dissertation mostly focused on the second part. Basically there is so much to choose, especially when you talk about food, but also any financial decisions. There are so many choices we have to make every day. You cannot think about everything rational. You cannot analyze all the options, the pros and the cons. And sometimes they are very complex. You just don't know what's better for you. So there I always assume the best from people so that they kind of, to some extent, know what's good for them, especially if you talk about food. Most people know in general that the apple is more healthy than the chocolate one. So in essence, they would be capable to make the right decisions. And what oftentimes happens is that they fail because of this environment or because of something happens there. Mm-hmm. So I think there's responsibility for the environment to help them, to steer them in a direction. And if you talk about like, what has the biggest effect? Is it the person? Is it the environment? I mean, I think that's a very difficult question. I think it's always a combination of the two. And if you talk about ethicality, like is it ethical to really steer people towards certain decisions? I think from the other hand, it's impossible to not steer people. Everything you put in the shelves in the supermarket, there's always something that's closest to you that could steer people. So there, I think it's our responsibility to use this knowledge to help people to make better choices. And now it's oftentimes used to let people buy more and more expensive or especially more unhealthy products. So I think there is our responsibility to at least make sure that the environment facilitates this behavior that can help people to do that. But I think it always goes hand in hand with educating people, that they know what to do, that they know what there is. That you also see a bit in my second research study. We know that the available support is there, but we also have to let them know, okay, it can help you to make the better choices. So it probably goes a bit hand in hand, but I think we should take the responsibility to design the environment to help them a bit.
Okay, and what do you exactly mean then? So we have to take the responsibility to redesign the environment. Does it go as far then as to ban certain products, to really oblige retailers to have much more healthy alternatives in the shelves than unhealthy alternatives? Or would you say, well, no, it's still the individual and his or her autonomy that is important. They should have freedom of choice. So we should just have everything in there and try to make some small changes that steers them a little bit more to the healthy issue.
Yeah, I think when there's a bit of twofold. So for example, if you're just choosing between the examples that I've been using, the apple of the chocolate, then I think this freedom of choice is important. Choosing the chocolate is also really not all the time a bad idea. But if you talk about things that really have a negative effect on health, smoking, alcohol to some extent, those kind of things, then I think we have the responsibility to really ban these kind of things. You saw with the smoking, prohibiting people from smoking inside has a huge impact, and much more than putting some pictures on the package of the cigarettes, those kind of things. So I think with these kind of behavior, it's kind of, if you design the environment in such a way, if you ban these kind of things, if policymakers make these decisions, then the message is clear to what the product should be and whether something is good for a product, for a person or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Giving the floor to Professor Dr. Ilona de Hooge, Marketing and Consumer Behavior, Wageningen University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, congratulations on finalizing such a nice piece of work. I always admire people who care about the well-being of others. And you do so already for 4 years intensively with studies, so that's really very impressive. I would like to have a discussion with you on chapter 3. In chapter 3, you focus on perceived social support, and you argue that the role of perceived social support positively affects healthy eating. That is, if we perceive the social support to be helpful for us, it leads to more healthy choices, right? Now, when you read the manipulation, and the manipulation is on page 37, I don't know whether the audience has read the manipulation, but it's quite a long piece of text. And if you read the manipulation, you have 2 different conditions. Right? You say, okay, I have low perceived societal support and high perceived societal support. Now, if you read the low societal support, you talk about not everyone has a fair chance. There's so much information and advice coming from people who might or might not be experts. It's almost impossible to filter this information and to determine what is best for you. People's financial situation can limit the chance. Joining a gym or a sports club can cost a lot of money and time. Healthy food is often more expensive and harder to acquire. That's quite depressive, I would say, if you add all of this together. And when I compare it to the other one, which is completely the opposite, I really wonder whether this is perceived social support. Because I can also interpret it as signaling perceived control, signaling whether I'm really able to do such a thing. Or you can also argue that it signals more social norms, indicating what the whole society says I should not or should do. So first of all, I wonder to what degree is this really perceived social support? And then based on your answer, we'll continue the discussion.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation and on the well-being and for your question. So indeed, in the 2 studies in this paper, we manipulated perceived societal support with the article. And we based also this manipulation on research from another field in the economic mobility literature, where they manipulate in a similar way perceived economic mobility. And we also tested with the pre-test whether it indeed tests societal support, for example, with items like the means provided by society enable people to eat healthy. So whether the means that do exist that could help you. So there, I think it is in line what we intend to measure. And you're asking, okay, could it also affect your control, whether you're feeling that you're able to reach your goals or more towards social norms? And I think especially the second one, it could also, of course, investigate or impact whether you think you're able to reach the goals. And we also think that this effect could happen, that you perceive the support to be helpful, which makes your attainability of your goal higher, which makes you more motivated to reach your goals. So I think there it would be very much related to each other, that you perceive, okay, that means that that do exist, that do help me. And that's a very thin line that makes you able to reach your goals. But I think what is also important there is that our dependent variable doesn't specifically go into the things we measure or we manipulate basically in this article. So we say, there's much information online, you can just go out and take a run, for example. Whereas our dependent variable is just a choice between healthy and not healthy eating. So it's not about that you use these kind of means to reach your goals. So I think that would underline for that it does manipulate societal support. And regarding the control, whether you feel in control or not, I think that could kind of go both ways. So either you could think, okay, the society has all the means that are and they would help me. So I can kind of lay back because everything is there in society, so I don't have to do anything. But that's not what we find. We actually find that people think, or at least that's our hypothesis, that people think, okay, everything, what I need is set in the environment, So now I should take control and make the right choices, because otherwise it's really my own fault. So I think there it kind of puts the level of control for the person itself. It kind of deviates from the environment. And you also asked whether it would impact social norms. I think that it would be interesting to look at, actually. I didn't think about it before, but you could indeed argue that if you basically say, okay, no one can reach your goals because you cannot filter all the information, that you think, it's not my fault, no one can do this, so I also don't have to behave in line. So I think that would be very interesting to see whether such manipulation also correlates a lot with the social norms, or whether this manipulation could change these social norms indeed, which we know that's of course also a very effective nudge there. So yeah, that would be very interesting to take a look at. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also relates to your manipulation check, because also in the manipulation check, you do not focus on people's individual situation or individual perceived support, right?
No.
Your manipulation, I didn't see all the questions of the manipulation, but one is, the means provided by society enable people to eat healthy, not necessarily enable me. So also that may it be interpreted as more social norms.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think you could either say that you just know that the environment, does help you, that helps everyone. So everyone is able to eat healthy. So indeed, I think that could also play a role there. Yeah.
And so that nicely links to the INS frame.
Yeah.
But then I would like to go to the conclusions that you draw in the general section. Do you have time for that? Yeah, okay. So, because on page 71, I will read it out loud, no worries. Okay. There you conclude from this chapter, even when support is available, individuals are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors when they believe that these resources are helpful to them personally. Therefore, in addition to increasing the availability of societal support, policymakers should consider communication strategies that reinforce the perceived effectiveness of existing resources. Yeah. But especially are helpful to them personally. To what degree can we then conclude this?
I think we can conclude that they do believe after this manipulation that it does help for everyone, basically, and everyone also includes themselves. Yeah. So I think I think it could also impact the social norms, but the social norms then go both ways. So that it does influence, manipulates that you think, okay, everyone around me can basically make these good choices, so I also have to do that. But it also means that you believe that you self can make, that you have all the means to reach your goals, basically.
And that actually relates to my final question, because on page 68, you conclude also from the same chapter. Chapter 3 examines how individuals' perceptions of the usefulness of these resources influence their food choices. And that, again, seemed to me another element of this whole storyline. So now that we've had the discussion, to what degree can we conclude that this is about the usefulness of the resources?
Yeah, I think the useful. So do you mean the difference between whether the means can help you to reach your goals or whether the means are useful?
Well, actually, I don't know because you wrote this.
No, but I want to clarify your question. Yeah. I think it again also here goes both ways. So basically, what the manipulation intend to do is that you believe that the means that are available are useful and hence help you to reach your goals, basically. So, for example, if you think about all the information online, you can either say there is so much information, but it's impossible for you to filter the information that you need, so it's not very useful for you, so you cannot really use it to reach your goals. Whereas in other parts we say, okay, all the means that are there, that's something you can use, and that will help you to reach your goals.
So that's just, again, another element in your manipulation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if anything, this opposition proves that path dependency is an issue. Not only in making your choices from our side in our organizing the opposition. We continue with the path another branch. We go to Dr. Tim Deuring, Consumer Behavior at Maastricht University. Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, first of all, congratulations getting to the end of your PhD and writing such a wonderful dissertation. My question is a little bit about the entire dissertation. First, when I first read it, it was titled Well-Being by Design. The title has since changed, but nevertheless, it is still focused and framed around enhancing subjective well-being. But then when I looked at each chapter individually, I couldn't find an explicit measure of subjective well-being. For example, how well are you feeling right now? In chapter 2, you measured the choice between healthy and unhealthy snacks. Then in chapter 3, it was food choices and actual consumption. And lastly, in chapter 4, it was evaluations and intentions, right? Could you walk us through why you decided not to include a specific measure about well-being? Then the next part of this question is, do you see these proxies as automatic antecedents? The behaviors you measured are these automatic antecedents of well-being? And lastly, if you look at these 3 different effects, which one would you expect to have the strongest influence on subjective well-being?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation. That indeed changed the title in the last couple of months, I think, to Shaping Choices, Shaping Minds. And that was the exact reason is because we focused indeed on these choices and these minds. And we didn't really specifically investigate, measure, and well-being. And I will at least answer your first 2 questions in parallel, because I think that the choices and the actual eating behavior and the self-evaluations are not necessarily a proxy of well-being. It's not necessarily that you make the good food choice, or that you feel that you evaluate your abilities more positive, that it automatically means that you are more happy or that you have higher well-being. And we focused on this specific parts because previous research has already linked making these choices and your eating behavior and your self-evaluations to this well-being. And I think with research it's always good to really focus on a specific part of some behavior or some evaluations in the part that you want to focus on, so you can really steer this. And then on one hand, well-being is sometimes also very hard to measure. There are quite some downsides of these self-reports of well-being. They more measure terms of happiness. Indeed, the example you also give, it's more how you feel right now. So that's more regarding the emotions, the short-term effects of well-being, not necessarily the long one. I do think it would be interesting to see, especially, for example, with the food choices, whether you're actually happier afterwards. Whereas, I mean, again, there is already quite some research that has linked the healthy food choices with higher level of satisfaction and well-being. So I think there we can build on this immense part of the previous research already to make this distinction. But nevertheless, it would be interesting, and I think especially with the 3rd project, so with the competitiveness and self-evaluation, that comes a bit back to the first question. Is, I mean, we do show consistently that it positively impacts your self-evaluations of your ability, but it can also have some downsides, this competitiveness, which could, for example, anxiety, stress, maybe overconfidence, which could negatively affect well-being. And that comes to the 3rd question, where I think that especially the 2nd research project, so feeling well surrounded, that has potential to really create this more long-term effect. So if you can create the environment in such a way that people perceive the support that is already there as helpful or useful, that they can make these better choices in the long run. Whereas I think the attraction effect is more a one-time, whenever you make the specific choice when the attraction effect is there, that's a bit more short-term. And the 3rd project could be more long-term, especially when we also investigated competitiveness as a trait. But again, there with the boundary condition that there could be some possible downside effects of it. Yep.
Thank you.
Good. We'll give the floor to Dr. Thomas Post, finance professor with us here at Maastricht University and secretary of this committee.
Yes, dear candidate, dear Gitta, Thank you very much for having the opportunity to read the thesis, which was a pleasure to read, although it took much more time than I had expected, because when I got the thesis, it's a very thin thesis, much thinner than the one we had, Lisa, 2 years ago from law faculty, 700 pages. And when I was asked to do this, I heard it's about healthy choices and something. Okay, I eat, so it's probably easy to digest. But what you actually do is not what many researchers would do, would say, well, we have studies on the impact of the color red and orange. Let's test what happens if we add yellow. Yeah? But what you do is more or less, you do this, plus let's combine that with if we play classical music or rock music. So all the time you need to think about, okay, now we have combined this and this, what is now the effect? So it's not so straightforward as it sounds, which is a compliment. Now, my question also relates to chapter 4, and it builds actually on Professor Bruggen's question, where her question was more into the direction, okay, will we observe maybe negative side effects, so not only positive effects on self-evaluations, but also on anxiety and other things. I'm more concerned about behaviors, and that could be negative side effects. Didn't write it in your thesis, I think, but you mentioned it in your earlier answer, the word overconfidence. I'm from finance. This is one of the most studied biases in finance, where we know that people that think they're above average, they save less, they trade more instead of buying diversified portfolios, they concentrate on single stocks, and so on and so forth. Now, that you work at NIBID, where you are concerned, hopefully, with the financial health of Dutch people, I was wondering, practically, if you would like to implement your manipulations. You make people more exercising and do sport, but maybe you create many more future consumers for NIBID.
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation and for your question. So we partly showed the behavior in the Forward project, where we showed that this enhanced self-evaluation could make your likeliness to share it with others there. I would say that having more customers at NIBID is not necessarily a good thing, because we mostly focus on people with lower income who are struggling there. So I hope I would not have more customers there because of this research. But I do think, so what we show in chapter, or in study 2A, is that it did not have an effect on grade. And I think that would be an interesting part, because if you would say, okay, there's really this overconfidence, so people think, I'm smart enough, I don't really have to study anymore, then you would perhaps, depending on the topic also, lessen their motivation to study maybe and have lower grades. But we did not find that effect. And I think that's especially also related to that we have, what I also said before, like more the subtle manipulation, that I think there is overconfidence, because I think the mean in that study is that on average people think on a scale from 1 to 10, they think of them as a 7. Well, I think statistically it should at least be a 5, so I think most people think that they are at least a bit smarter than others, but it didn't really result in extreme overconfidence, that you think you're much more smarter and really are far away from your reality. So I think there in the studies as we set them up at this point, it didn't have negative effects on this motivation, for example, to study for a test. And thinking about in the research, what we do at NIBID and the financial decision making, I think if you would could manipulate this competitiveness, that people at least could heighten their self-efficacy, or at least that they think that they can handle their finances, it could motivate them to also make more financial prudent or better decisions there, as long as you, again, do not take it too far to make them overconfident, that they think they can invest everything, that they can spend a lot of money there. But I think you could there draw a parallel that could motivate them to be confident about themselves and to know what they can spend.
And then maybe also coming back to the S and the I frame, combining that, the higher motivation, self-efficacy, with the right decision-making environment that might prevent making all these mistakes we observe.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
if you say that people think a bit better about themselves than they truly are, but not too much, it triggers the question, did you have finance professors in your sample?
Maybe.
We'll continue seriously, and we kept the best for the last. We give the floor to Dr. Anouk Vestjes, Consumer Behavior at Maastricht University. Anouk, the floor is yours.
So dear Gitta, congratulations with finishing your PhD. It was easy to read, it was well structured, it had many interesting results in it. And also congratulations that you, while doing your PhD, were a nice colleague in our department. But I have, first of all, a follow-up question, maybe to Thomas's question. You said, okay, when they placed themselves on the ladder, they gave themselves a 7 compared to others, right? And that makes me think, okay, compared to others, I find this interesting, right? Because a lot of your measures are comparative, in a sense. You put yourself on a ladder compared to others. Yep. And you also frame it very much, if you look in the mirror, you think you're better when you had this competition prime, right? But to what extent are you so sure that it's really about yourself and not when you're in this competitive modus, you see others worse? And to what extent could this also be moderated by the expertise you have? Like if you are becoming better in a certain, because you actually refer to the Dunning-Kruger effect, but this effect also says when you become very good at something, you know how bad you are, right? So these two questions, to what extent is it about the self and not seeing others as being worse than you? And to what extent is your effect related to your expertise in the domain?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words about my dissertation and for your question. So we indeed, I think we specifically state that this ladder represents where you stand in terms of intelligence in society, for example. So that implicitly implies that you rate yourself compared to others. And I think on one hand, with these kind of evaluations, the abstract evaluations, the more vaguer one, you always compare yourself to others, because how would you otherwise rate your intelligence? If I would rate my intelligence in a room full of professors, then I would probably rate my intelligence differently than in another type of group. So I think you always compare yourself to, okay, where do I stand relatively to the others in the society? In a previous version, a study of this project, a bit the different study, but there we also asked how they would rate others, and there we did not find an effect there. So that would imply that with the competitiveness doesn't make you want to downplay the others basically, but really upgrades the evaluations of yourself. But I think with these kind of evaluations, it's by definition, a comparative one in this case. And I think some reasoning for this Dunning-Kruger effect, I think you kind of see in the study 2A, where we still see an effect, but it does become smaller towards the end. So towards the end, where students come closer to their grade and they kind of know, okay, how they're doing compared to their students maybe. They have some in-between evaluation, those kind of things. Then their rating of their intelligence comes a bit lower. So I think that is in line with the theory that you say, okay, the smarter you become, basically, at some point you're realizing, okay, there's so much more that I still don't know. So that could play a role there,
Okay, thank you. And could the grade they predict they will have in the course be an evaluation of your intelligence?
Sorry, can you?
You have in one study the grade they would predict they will have in the course. Is that you say, I don't know how people would rate their intelligence if it's not comparative. Could that be something, or?
Yeah, so in this study, we also measured the grade they expected to receive. So in all the measurements, so in the first measurement, we measured competitiveness, and all the other measurements, we measured their how intelligence they would rate themselves, but also which grade they expected. So that would be a bit more focused on the self. We did not find an effect there, so no correlation there. And that's most likely probably due to, that's a very concrete measurement. So this self-enhancement type of effects are more shown in more the abstract, more the vague dimensions or context, where you have more room to deviate from your actual abilities. But in this specific concrete dimensions, such as your expected grade, or for example, in the second domain, how fast you can run or something, there people usually much less deviate from, much less self-enhance, I would say. So yeah, to some extent, it's also more a concrete measurement about the self instead of compared to others. But I think in that study, the most important reason that we did not find an effect is that it is more concrete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. So I move on with my second question then. So it's about chapter 2, about the attraction effect, right? You say at several points, it's especially in situations where you have this self-control, right? And you have limited cognitive capacities often, that you will use these heuristics. But to what extent is it really about this self-control, right? Because if you exert a lot of self-control, you may be more involved in the situation or actually use more cognitive resources. So to what extent is it related to this self-control rather than just having worse-defined, ill-defined preferences in those domains? You don't know whether you choose this or that thing.
Yeah, so the attraction effect usually works better when you have like conflicting choices. So when you need to trade off, so that the one choice scores better on one domain and the other choice scores better on the other domain. So that's this conflict, that's this trade-off where people oftentimes fall back to heuristics. Because there's no really value calculation there that they can really see, okay, which one's better. So then they're more prone to these kind of heuristics, and the attraction effect works there. I think what's most relevant there is this self-control part, whereas basically we say, okay, the healthy versus unhealthy product is a self-control conflict, and I think we can also debate about that, right? So it's not for everyone that this apple is more in line with the long-term goals and the chocolate more in line with the short-term goals, and they're debating their short versus long-term. So I think there that only holds for a certain amount of people, but we did not find that the effect dependent on whether someone has high or low self-control there. So I think that kind of aligns with the fact that maybe it's not necessarily a self-control conflict for everyone, but it's more related to this trade-off of the one product having something the other product doesn't have, and vice versa.
So, and if the trade-off would be deleted, but you would just not have specific, well-defined preferences up front, do you think you would see it as well?
Yeah, then I think we would especially see it when you are like, okay, I just want a snack, but I like grapes, I like the cookies. Yeah, I'm a bit indifferent. There, especially the effect would probably be stronger. That's why we also chose for this target and competitive product to be pretty high in the attractiveness that what we pre-tested, that they really like it in general, because there the heuristics have an even stronger effect. Whereas you already know, I really like cookies, I really hate grapes, then that would not shift your preference. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Then we go back to the start and give the floor to Chair of the Assessment Committee, Professor Lisa Brugge.
Yes, I would like to follow up on the discussion that you had with Professor Geuns about stimulating more healthy eating behavior, where you said that companies could use choice architecture or communication about social support. But in many organizations, for example, in fast food, the margins on French fries are much higher than on salad. Actually, salad is a very delicate product that expires quickly and it's very expensive with low margins. And so the self-interest from organizations is simply to sell more French fries because they will make more profit. And so I would really like to challenge you a little bit more and think a little bit deeper, because what is it then that you could really do, also as policymakers, to counter the self-interest from organizations?
Yeah, I think indeed, and that's what usually this context effect, such as the attraction effect, is used for, is to guide you towards a product that marketeers want to sell, which is oftentimes the one with the biggest margin, so either the largest one, or which is also the most unhealthy one. But I think we could also challenge the marketeers to take a step further there. It's not just about what I'm selling now, but if I walk out of McDonald's might not be the best example, but another restaurant which is not typical, only unhealthy, if I would walk out there with a better feeling, then I would maybe also copy that feeling to the yeah. So that you also copy this positive feeling to the restaurant you just visited and perhaps come back to it.
Thank you. Hora est. This means that the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense, and I request that you and your company await the result of our deliberations in this room. Having said that, we all have our opinions. We will share them. And you know that with all the opinions in the world, you make sure that you hold the one about yourself to be very positive. So. Dear Mrs. van den Ende, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense, and in view of its positive verdict, Dr. van den Ende, and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has indeed decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Gaukes is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university law and custom. I invite your supervisor promoter to now take the floor.
Please all rise.
Dear Gitta, very formal now. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes.
I promise.
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Gitta van den Ende, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Dr. Geligaskis is ready to speak out the laudatio for you.
Dear Gitta, I'm not sure whether you know this, but our very first contact goes back to January 13th, 2017, when I received an email from a new master thesis student who had just been assigned to me, Gitta. And yes, that was a Friday, Friday the 13th. People say Friday the 13th brings bad luck, but we disagree. It brought us Gitta. And Gitta is anything but bad luck. So let me walk you through Gitta, one letter at a time. Gitta has grit, real determination and resilience. Your PhD path was not the smoothest. Corona arrived at exactly the wrong moment, turning data collection and daily collaboration upside down. But like the korfball player you were, you kept the ball in the air. You adapted and adjusted your tactics and refused to let the circumstances win. And then there was the online ACR conference. Being online for 1.5 hours at 3 in the morning, with one participant finally joining, an absolute anticlimax. But you stayed calm, professional, and even found humor in the absurdity of it all. Lastly, your writing. Let's be honest. You've always said, I'm not a writer. And that was your go-to line whenever the introduction or discussion had to be done. Your strategy was clear. Write the methods and results first, and then delay, and delay the rest. And you know what? You were right. You're not a writer. Case closed. But you are someone who pushes through things you don't enjoy, who keeps going until it's done. And that too is grit. Integrity. Whether it is research, teaching, or teamwork, you do things the right way, not the easy way. Your sense of responsibility is remarkable, and your honesty and consistency make you someone people trust immediately. You're also open about your strengths and weaknesses, and that honesty makes working with you refreshing. You never pretend to know something you don't. You ask for help at exactly the right moment, and you collaborate in a way that lifts everyone up. You're analytical, thoughtful, sharp, and precise. Someone people can rely on in the details, but also in the bigger picture. Talent. Your talent was visible long before you recognized it yourself. It became clear to me very early on that you had both the talent and the curiosity to be very good at research. You didn't see that right away, so it took a few meetings to persuade you to continue with the research master. Luckily for all of us, you took on the challenge, and you did so brilliantly, earning what I like to call your golden ticket to a PhD position. And this was so well deserved. Already in the research master, you stood out for your analytical skills. During your PhD, you were always eager to dive into the data and the analysis as soon as the data came in. You already understood the data, you really understood the data, something not many people can claim. So above all, you really, really love data and statistics. Team spirit. People often imagine academics as lonely writers hidden away in their ivory towers. If there's anyone who completely breaks that stereotype, it's you. You're not someone who likes to work alone, definitely not in an ivory tower. Just 2 weeks ago, you told us how much you enjoy your current job and how academia sometimes felt a bit too lonely for you. You're a team player both at work and in your sports. We all remember those Corona days when you had to work from home and kept an open Skype line with Kimberly the whole day. While some of us appreciated the silence, you absolutely hated it. And you were one of the very first to return to the office when it was allowed again. And finally, authenticity. What you see is what you get. Sincere, steady, and wonderfully no-nonsense, with a dry comment ready exactly when you need it. Your authenticity also shows in the choices you make outside academia. You're not only a team player, you're a true family person. Nothing comes before family. We will never forget the day Naomi's mother became ill. It was a shock. Your planned trip to Singapore to visit NTU was first cancelled, then shortened, because leaving Naomi alone simply was not an option. In the end, you still went, and it was undoubtedly an amazing experience. But we also know how happy you were to come home, back to your family and your friends, where you belong. Seeing how close illness came to your family is what made you decide to take part in the Alpe d'Huez. Running up the Alpe d'Huez to raise money for cancer research wasn't just an event for you, it meant something real. And that's very typical for you. You take on challenges with heart, and when you commit to something, you really mean it and you really go for it. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. You are now working as a scientific officer at the Nationaal Instituut voor Budgetvoorlichting, NIBUD. You still get to do the research, but now it's much closer to the people you're doing it for. It suits you perfectly. Socially engaged research that truly benefits society. The second chapter of your dissertation is called Feeling Well Surrounded. And there's no better description for you as a person than this. You are at your best when you are surrounded by colleagues, friends, clients, and family. And when we saw the names of your friends' WhatsApp groups, we couldn't agree more. Even we would love to be part of the bitterbels and the lekkere leven. So yes, Friday the 13th brought us Gitta, but more importantly, with Gitta, it showed us what grit, integrity, talent, team spirit, and authenticity look like in practice. Gitta, from Caroline and me, congratulations on all the hard work you've put in. We know how much you looked forward to this day, and now it's finally here. You did it. Congratulations to you and your family. Time to celebrate.
Thank you.
Dr. van den Ende, I hereby also congratulate you on behalf of the whole SBE community and the Maastricht University community. Well done, clear presentation, enjoyable defense, couldn't have done better. I'm asking you and your members of the family to just follow us until you reach the stairs of the building where we have a photo op. And for the congratulations, we do it just next to the stairs at what we call the little museum. Okay, thank you very much. I hereby close this ceremony